This is Ahval Online, meeting point of accurate news and free comment on the current affairs of Turkey. Welcome to our podcast series.
Hello, and welcome to Talking Turkey. I'm your host, Ahval editor David Lepeska, and with me today is Fiona Mullen, director of the Cyprus-based consulting firm Sapienta Economics. Good morning, Fiona, and thanks so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
Bear with me for a second, please, as I need to begin with a bit of history. In July 1974, Turkey invaded Cyprus a few days after an Athens-backed coup. Turkish forces soon divided the island into an arrangement that largely still stands today, with the Turkish Republic of North Cyprus recognized only by Turkey, and the Republic of Cyprus, an EU member, divided by a United Nations watched line of control that runs through the capital, Nicosia. After a series of failed reunification talks, the discovery of the Tamar gas field off of Israel in 2009 sparked a gas rush in the eastern Mediterranean. 2 years later, Cyprus made its own find, and hopes soon began to emerge that the significant discoveries around the island would lead to reunification, as both sides would be driven by the desire to cash in. That, surprise, surprise, has not happened. We'll get to the latest tensions soon enough, but Fiona, if you could, please give us, you've been there, I think, 15, 20 years, give us a sense of how the gas rush has in the past decade reshaped the Eastern Mediterranean and Turkish Cypriot relations in particular.
Yeah, so I think at the beginning, everyone was hoping that the gas was going to give an incentive to the other side. So the Greek Cypriots thought that if they had gas, that would give them leverage over the Turkish Cypriots. And the Turkish Cypriots responded pretty fast. So immediately, as soon as the Aphrodite well was drilled in 2011, they signed an agreement with Turkey to give licenses to essentially a whole bunch of overlapping blocks. So I think it covers about 40% or something at least of the Republic of Cyprus EEZ. So they were also playing the same game that, look, we've got Turkey behind us, so you have an incentive to come to the table as well. So each side was hoping that the other side had a bigger incentive to come to a deal, and in the end, it's actually gone in the opposite direction with as I'm sure you know, Turkey drilling in various blocks around Cyprus now.
Right. In November, Turkey signed this maritime borders deal with the Tripoli-based government of national accord in Libya, which largely ignores international law and contests the claims of Greece. As peace talks have begun in recent weeks, Cyprus and Greece have vowed that they would block any resolution to the Libyan war that does not include the cancellation of Turkey's maritime deal. I wonder what people think of it there. How bizarre is it to people and officials in Cyprus that Libya's civil war is having a significant impact on Cyprus's energy objectives and has undermined Turkish Cypriot relations?
Yeah, well, I think I think the bigger shock is that what the Greek Cypriots had been relying on all these years, and to a certain extent were successful, was a certain kind of stable international order. So, they were the internationally recognized Republic of Cyprus. That's sort of, you'd already had 1974, but it kind of prevented Turkey from doing much more than that. But so they have been, in fact, even still in the last few days, you have spokespeople saying the fact that the EEZ is done under international law and so on, this is our protection. And in fact, when the reality is completely the opposite, Turkey is now on its fifth drill, assuming it's actually drilled everywhere where it's sent drill ships, which is another question nobody seems to know the answer to. But it now seems to be on its fifth drill in the area which is supposed to be the Republic of Cyprus EEZ. And I think so how has the Libya thing changed that? I think it's made it worse, actually, for Greek Cypriots, is that suddenly this whole thing has been a lot more internationalized, and that means deals are going to be made without Cypriots, Greek Cypriots or Turkish Cypriots at the table. And I think you saw that a hint of that already in Berlin, where they didn't even invite Greece, let alone any Cypriots to the table. So I don't know if they've realised that yet, but I do think that that's where it's heading. And so how does this, I mean, going back to your question about how does it affect relations with Turkish Cypriots, the kind of tunnel vision, if you like, for Greek Cypriots is that they never think about Turkish Cypriots. For them, it's always about Turkey. The Cyprus problem, it's, the mantra is it's invasion, occupation is. So they never even think of it in those terms. This is Turkey, 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 and I think they ought to be worrying by now that maybe Greece's priority is to get that Libya maritime agreement cancelled, and if they're faced with the choice of get that agreement cancelled and don't have to go to war over Crete or drilling south of Crete, I think they'll go for that. If it means that they might have to hang the Cypriots out to dry, I think there's a risk that might happen.
As you say, Turkey recently dispatched its fourth or fifth drilling ship in the past year or so to the waters off Cyprus. The Yavuz drill ship, which was again accompanied by a Turkish naval vessel, went to Block 8 of Cyprus Exclusive Economic Zone, or EEZ, an area for which Eni of Italy and Total of France paid Nicosia millions of euros to secure drilling rights. The Cyprus Mail called this, quote, another humiliation inflicted on the Cyprus Republic by Turkey. Does Turkey have any legitimate claim to this area, or is it just an act of aggression?
No, it doesn't. It's important to distinguish between the two. There's two sort of different kind of claims going on. So in the west of Cyprus, there's an area which Turkey claims as its continental shelf, and that cuts into parts of blocks 1, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And actually, the Greek Cypriots have never drilled there. They have licensed, part of that area is licensed blocks, but no one has ever actually tried to drill there. And Turkey makes it very clear that it's diplomatic language, but what it means is we'll shoot if anybody comes there. But then you have the other blocks which were licensed by the Turkish Cypriots to the Turkish Petroleum Corporation. So in a sense, it is drilling on behalf of the Turkish Cypriots in areas which they claim. Do they claim them, or are they? It's their logic. So what is the Turkish Cypriots' logic for licensing basically the same blocks as the Greek Cypriots? They say, look, you unilaterally took over the Republic of Cyprus. You have unilaterally issued licenses for areas that belong to both of us, and so we're going to do the same. So that's their kind of logic for issuing licenses. So Block 8 is it's a Turkish Cypriot sort of claim, but I would say in any international law terms, it is a lot weaker than anything in the continental shelf. I mean, whatever you cannot both Turkey and the Greek Cypriots overclaim what international law says about continental shelf areas. They both claim, it would definitely be go our way, and so on. But actually, drilling in a block of an internationally recognised country is, it should be going beyond the pale. But the issue is that the EU doesn't seem that willing to do much about it.
But in the unlikely event that there was some sort of reunification solution, Turkish Cypriots would get some revenue from the gas finds in this block, right? So in a way, there is some legitimacy to these claims.
They would get, what has been a long-standing, way back to the Annan Plan, long-standing what they call convergence, which is agreement in principle, is that natural resources would be federal. So it wouldn't be actually the Greek Cypriots get some, the Turkish Cypriots get some. The joint federal government comprising Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots would get that money. So I think what in a way it's even suggestions. There have been some suggestions among Greek Cypriots saying let's put put some money in an account. This is assuming you can ever get the gas out of the ground and sell it to anybody, which is open to question. But let's put some money in an account and in an escrow account, untouchable, and say this is for Turkish Cypriots. That's already moving in a direction of admitting that the country is never going to be put back together again, I would say. I mean, it has that element to it, as saying, let's split the country and give you a chunk of the gas revenue.
Either way, the presence of these Turkish ships in this area doesn't seem to send a very strong message to international energy firms like Eni and Total regarding their deals with Cyprus. The Cyprus Mail editorial went on to say that Turkey has exposed as false the Cypriot government's claims that it is a major energy player in the Mediterranean with its deals with Israel and Egypt and so on.
Yeah. I mean, that was the big hope. That Greek Cypriots thought that they could be that they could be the great energy hub in the region, and so on and so forth. And I think, I mean, it's not impossible, but you can't do it without solving the Cyprus problem. If the advantage of Cyprus versus even Egypt. I mean, Egypt is the natural hub, to be honest. But apart from Turkey, the Greek Cypriots have good relations with everybody in the region. They talk to the Lebanese, they talk to the Israelis, the Palestinians, Egyptians, and so on. If they could also add Turkey to that, then they could be a serious player. But they've sort of gone around it the wrong way round, I think, which has just ended up, with this humiliation that the Cyprus Mail spoke about.
Well, the EU has said for weeks now that it is planning to sanction Turkey for the drilling off Cyprus, but it has been dragging its feet to the growing frustration of Greek Cyprus. A few days ago, Cypriot officials seemed to take matters into their own hands when they blocked new EU sanctions on Russia-annexed Crimea in what many see as an effort to get the EU to act on Turkey's drilling. Do you expect these EU sanctions on Turkey soon? And could this issue potentially drive a wedge between Cyprus and its crucial partner, the EU?
Yeah, well, I think it already has driven a wedge. I mean, there are a lot of different areas where the Cyprus problem stands in the way of EU external action. Anything where there's EU and NATO working together, it can't go ahead because either Turkey won't deal with Cyprus or Cyprus won't deal with Turkey. And now on the sanctions issue, sanctions for Russia, there's always been an issue anyway. And this is where I've been trying to sort of say on Twitter to Greek Cypriots that, look, you need to build in this new world order, as I call it, where you can't just rely on the rule of law. You absolutely have to rely on building good relations with and being useful to and not being a pain in the neck for all of your allies. Just sitting there and threatening to block is not going to get you anywhere. You really need to think of different ways of doing this. And in the background to all of this is that because certainly from an international point of view, I know the Greek Cypriots will say it wasn't this way, but the international opinion is that the people who stopped Crans-Montana from moving to the next level, which was when the prime ministers and so on were going to talk. So this was the big conference in 2017, was supposed to end the Cyprus problem.
The last big talks between Turkey and Cyprus.
And it was the Greek Cypriots who weren't prepared to go to the next level. And everybody internationally is blaming the Greek Cypriots for that. They have a completely different narrative. They say it's Turkey's fault. They weren't prepared to really put certain things in writing to do with security, which I can talk about if you're interested. But that's sort of, they're losing a certain amount of goodwill, and it doesn't help that back in 2004, ex-President Tassos Papadopoulos said no to the Annan Plan, which was the other big attempt to solve the Cyprus problem. So on the one hand, you've got these people saying, well, if you solved this problem, we wouldn't have this problem in the first place. And now you're asking us to come and back you up when it's really difficult for us because Erdogan's threatening to send us more refugees if we sanction him, etc., etc. So they're in a really tough position, and they've sort of backed themselves into a corner to a certain extent, I think.
On that point, about a year ago, the Cypriot, Egyptian, Greek, Israeli, Italian, Jordanian, and Palestinian energy ministers met in Cairo, Cairo to launch the East Med Gas Forum, a platform for energy collaboration and partnership that would theoretically oversee a regional gas market. One country was conspicuously absent from the gathering. So to some extent, one could understand Ankara's frustrations. I wonder how you see the East Med Gas Forum delivering its promises and how you see Turkey maybe interrupting its efforts.
Yeah, I think, look, it's not a bad thing in itself. It's good to get all of these countries talking about energy and beyond energy, other issues as well. But I think, and Greece has tried to be saying, look, this is not exclusive. Other countries are invited as long as they, behave themselves, as it were, which is an obvious message to Turkey. The local media narrative here I live in the south, so on the Greek Cypriot narrative has been, this is going to make us really strong and stop Turkey from pushing us around, which is clearly not been the case given what they've been doing in the exclusive economic zone in the past few months. So yeah, at the moment it seems to. So I wouldn't say you should never have done it, but somehow it seems to have provoked Turkey rather than anything else. And instead of leading to a diplomatic route to everyone cooperating, Turkey's obviously decided to take the high-risk route of just saying, well, right, I'm just going to drill here and I'm going to make agreements with other people.
Interesting. I mean, everybody describes these tensions as largely Turkey's fault because of Erdogan's acts of aggression, but you suggest that it's also been some mistakes on the side of Athens and Nicosia.
Well, I think it could or it couldn't be. I mean, if you were serious about solving the Cyprus problem, and this has always been the big question for, how serious are they really about sticking the country back together under a federal umbrella? If you were serious about it, and all of this was happening in parallel, so you're hooking up with Israel, Egypt, so on, you're pleasing, let's say, the Americans by getting Egyptians and Israelis to talk more publicly. We probably all know they talk in private a lot anyway, but and you're moving along to solve the Cyprus problem, then it all fits together. Then it's all something which has a very positive impact on stability in the Eastern Mediterranean. But I go back to this issue that and they will hate me for saying this, but it's a matter of fact that the international community thinks that the Greek Cypriots didn't try hard enough in Crans-Montana, and so there's a lot of bad feeling about that, and we now have all of this blow up in the East Med, which is partly related to the fact that the Cyprus problem still isn't solved.
You're in Cyprus today. What are the people there feeling these days? Do the people in the north and south generally get along? Are they fearing war these days?
They well, what is very interesting and positively surprising, but even shocking, but in a positive way, is that at least according to some recent polls, which I think they're not yet in the public domain, so I can't say where they've come from, but the most surprising thing is among Greek Cypriots, you have the highest support for a solution of the Cyprus problem ever, which is really surprising. So despite, this was carried out in October, but in October we'd already had 3 to 4 drill ships in the EEZ by then. So the public is saying, you know what, we could go for a federal solution, but the political elite doesn't seem to be ready to go for it. I mean, there's a lot of caveats for that. The question was if the two leaders agree. So if the two leaders agree, meaning Nikos Anastasiadis in the south and Mustafa Akinci in the north, if they agree, that means there's a whole load of assumptions there. It means they've agreed on security. It means they've agreed on a whole bunch of other things. So, but that's really surprising. There's also
why do you think that is right now?
Sorry?
Why do you think that is right now? There's such a consensus for that.
Well, the last time you saw a sudden flip up on the Greek Cypriot side. So you will always get a majority on the Turkish Cypriot side saying they want a solution. I mean, for years and years and years now. But you've never had a majority on the Greek Cypriot side where you literally just ask them, if there were a referendum tomorrow on the basis of an agreement agreed between the two leaders, would you vote yes? So it went over 50% for the first time. It was a couple of years ago when there were threats to UNFICYP, so the UN peacekeeping force. The Americans were getting a bit tough on, whether or not they would keep funding it. And all of a sudden, the Greek Cypriots thought, "Oh my God, we better solve the Cyprus problem." So I think maybe something similar is going on. I'm only speculating, but I think they understand that we're getting nowhere. You join the EU, you think the EU can protect you from Turkey. It turns out it can't. And certainly can't protect your gas ambitions. And there's even bits and pieces going on in the buffer zone at the moment. Turkey's built another observation post inside what is supposed to be the buffer zone. It's now starting to man it, and so little by little, it's like I think they realise that they just keep losing with this without a solution. But unfortunately, at the political level, I think, to put it politely, they're just very risk averse. And so they're now toying with ideas of saying, could he have a looser federation? And there's rumours that really they want two states and so on. But all of that is horribly complicated because Cyprus is a member of the EU. So, it's difficult to know where that can go.
Speaking of new issues on the ground, last summer, Turkish officials began talking about reopening and reviving Varosha, the former Cypriot resort shuttered after their 1974 invasion. Turkish Cypriot PM Ersin Tatar said it would be like Las Vegas. What do you think? Could this actually happen?
I have to declare an interest here because I am a member of the Famagusta Eco City project, where we're trying to say, let's green Varosha, let's not turn it into Las Vegas. But,
okay.
Well, it seems to have gone. Okay, there's two issues. One is that there's a plan to do up, let's say, revive the whole area around Famagusta, including Varosha, and that seems to have stalled in the past couple of weeks because of internal fighting within the Turkish Cypriot political parties. But I think so with my eco-city hat on, I think it would be a dreadful shame if it were only a casino city, with or without. So the plan is, sorry, let me reverse a little bit. The problem with opening Varosha under Turkish Cypriot control is it's not really in keeping with UN Security Council resolutions. So you're only going to get Turkish investment there, and it's highly likely that it's going to be sort of casino-style investment, which doesn't really turn it into a resort that's anything new or different from anywhere else. So it's just going to create more divisions and more problems if they open it that way. One of the interesting things is Varoshans generally, Greek Cypriot Varoshans, are generally quite pro-solution, not least because Varosha was always the area that was going to come back first under what's called territorial adjustment. So if you have a solution within 100 days, Varosha will be back. And it's mainly Greek Cypriot owned property in there. But you turn it into a casino strip and basically don't give it back. It's another wedge between the two communities.
The last question for you, something you referenced earlier. Turkish Cypriot leader Mustafa Akıncı said earlier this month, quote, "It's clear that the solution of the Cyprus problem is no longer just a need for Cyprus, but for the region as well." Indeed, but the problem, of course, is that now with so many players, it seems much harder to find a deal that works for all. So I'm wondering what you think. How far are we from some sort of resolution in Cyprus, and do you expect any progress in 2020?
I think a lot might depend on who wins the election. So Mustafa Akıncı is facing re-election on the 26th of April, and again on, if it's 2 rounds, the 3rd of May. And it's not clear. So he's clearly the pro-solution guy. He's going to be up against Ersin Tatar, who's the prime minister in the north at the moment of the UBP, so the right-wing candidate, and he'll be up against potentially Tufan Erhuman, who's the head of the CTP, CTP, who are the left-wing side. So, plus a bunch of other candidates, but those are the three strongest at the moment. So, if Tatar wins, I think I can't see any serious effort to solve the Cyprus problem under a federal umbrella. I think what you might see, going back to what you said, that the Cyprus problem is becoming more painful for everyone. It's painful for the EU, it's painful for Turkey, it's painful for Israel, it's painful for the Greek Cypriots, and painful for Greece. You need an end to the Cyprus problem, but will that end up as some sort of deal where you Taiwanize, as they call it, the north, or does it end up in the bi-zonal, bi-communal federation, etc., etc.? And I think it depends a lot on who wins that election in April.
And you think Akıncı is the best hope for some sort of resolution?
Well, he would be, if Akıncı wins, then you're definitely, everyone's been avoiding getting back to the table until this election is over. So at least you've got a pro-solution guy on the Turkish Cypriot side. We still have to deal with Anastasiadis' risk aversion when it comes to the Cyprus problem. But there's a lot of, I could talk, it's going to run over time, but there's a lot of internal party rivalry. So it's on who else might be in round two. So Ersin Tatar, strictly speaking, ought to be the natural round two person. But within UBP, not everybody likes him. So they may actually support, there's rumours they may support Tufan Erhuman from the CTP just in order to keep Tatar out of the second round. Now, Erhuman ought to be pro-solution as well, and potentially with better relations with Turkey. So Akıncı's fallen out too much with Turkey, which is another reason why they don't really want him. So it's all in the mix. But I think my worry is that the international developments, the Libya thing, the Greece thing, etc., will force what I call the quick fix, and not the quick fix, the stitch up, the stitch up of the Cyprus problem, where there's some deal on gas. Maybe Varosha comes back and the Northern Cyprus is de facto recognised, and it's presented to everybody as a confidence-building measure, so you don't have to ask anybody in a referendum about it. But it is the de facto formal partition of Cyprus.
It seems like progress, but it's actually just keeping everything in place as it is.
Well, it leads to the loose. I mean, it means that the Turkish Cypriots have less recognition issues in return for the Greek Cypriots being able to exploit their gas. That's the kind of deal I can imagine taking place because everybody else needs this problem out of the way. I mean, it's not an ideal solution. I mean, next week I'll be launching something to a report on why a solution will create all kinds of opportunities that don't exist now. But the let's say the hard-headed, the realpolitik is that that's the way it might go, despite the fact that the population is actually generally in favour, which is the great shame about it.
Okay, we'll be looking forward to that report. Fiona Mullen of Sapienta Economics, thanks so much for your time and insight.
You're welcome.
You can follow Ahval News Online podcast series through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, and Spreaker. All you need to know about Turkey is here, for your ears, mind, and attention. Thank you for listening to our podcast.